Hey everybody, before we get started, just a reminder, this episode brought to you by patrons like Go Comics, Qua, Jeremy Vasquez, Kylie Denton, Nestor Flores, Soda-san 0424, and VideoGamer75. If you like what we do want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. You can get access to episodes early, lots of other guys, and really help us out. Thanks for your support, everybody. Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we talk to you and tell you if you want to roll a 5-star. Or maybe a 3-star? Or maybe a 4-star? I don't know, but today a 5-star. That's a fun joke. Look forward to maybe a couple of non-standard wanteds in the coming year, just to have some more fun with it and stuff. And then, apparently, a year from now, look forward to the Lucky Trilogy, because he may or may not take all the new Sakura faces and also Lady Murasaki. Anyway, that's the future. We'll see about how that shakes out. For nowsies, we're here to talk about a new 5-star, our second foreigner, also limited 5-star foreigner, Hokusai, coming with the new year. And in general, the format of Wanted is we break down a character's real-life history or folklore, their lore with a capital L in the Fate franchise, then we move on to their mechanics, and then finally we talk about their rarity, not their star rarity, though sometimes, obviously, like I said, that may actually need to be mentioned, but in general, it's 5 stars of this show. And the banner rarity is the actual thing we're going for, how frequently their rate-ups are, because that can be a huge driving force in whether you feel you have to roll for a servant right now, right? So, yeah. Hokusai. Katsushika Hokusai. Or many, many other names. So, let's just jump right into history. No point in holding back. We've got quite a bit of stuff to talk about. Mainly that Hokusai is a Japanese artist, famous for ukiyo-e paintings and woodblock prints, many, many other forms of art in the Edo period, and actually born in Edo, now Tokyo. And probably one of the most famous Japanese artists. You have almost assuredly seen some of Hokusai's artworks. Possibly the most, I think, iconic is probably the Great Wave of Kanagawa, one of the prints from 36 Views of Mount Fuji, which is one of his most famous collections, but also responsible for Hokusai manga, and many, many other prints. Also did actually do some erotica called shunga, including the infamous Dream of the Fisherman's Wife, which may be relevant to other stuff later. But yeah, did a lot of iconic and long-lasting artworks, a lot of long-lasting, impressive art that influenced future works, such as influencing Art Nouveau and Impressionism, so even having impact outside of Japan in addition to being iconically Japanese. So there's your fame right there. Hokusai had a lot of names in his life, the childhood name of Tokitaro, but so many, many other names and many other titles, like so many, I can't even them all. Though one of them, at least, I will mention is famous, translated as the old man mad about art. Hokusai did a pretty significant transition in ukiyo-e painting, which was usually portraits of, kabuki actors, courtesans. Basically, I guess the idea would be almost like celebrity, famous people who were good to look at and you might recognize. And Hokusai kind of moved that onto sweeping landscapes and kind of changed things. Studied at several schools, was painting for a long, long time. Best guess is that Hokusai was born somewhere around the 31st of October in 1760 and lived 88 years until 1849. So Hokusai is actually a relatively recent servant, as far as that goes. Not the most recent, but considering the power level here, fairly recent in terms of that. But we'll talk more about that in lore stuff. But started painting at a very young age, never really stopped, even working at, his extreme age. And some of the most famous works were done even in the age of over 60, A lot of those iconic works we know are from even later in his life. So, yeah, Hokusai altogether is pretty iconic and long-lasting. It's really hard to dive deep into even more because I would need to give you a whole, art lecture, like I said. From research it seemed that he started painting probably about, 6. His father worked with mirrors, and he painted mirrors until, like I said, he died at age 88. So I can't, in a 20-minute show, can't boil down, 8 decades worth of work. Look it up. You probably will be shocked how many of these paintings you recognize if you don't realize they were Hokusai artworks. But important to the character of Hokusai the servant, we should also mention that Hokusai was married twice, had several children, and his youngest daughter was known as Katsushika or Oo'i, which is usually rendered when talking about the characters in Fate as like O apostrophe I, but Oe or Oo'i, who was a student of his, an assistant of his. She was actually married briefly, but apparently did not get along well with her husband and thought he was a bad artist, so she divorced him and went back to live with her dad and assisted him in painting, including producing some works which were also under the name of her father Hokusai, and other pseudonyms, because so many pseudonyms. And if you're interested in that story a little bit more, there have also been some adaptations on that kind of thing, such as a few novelizations and the Miss Hokusai manga, which was turned into an adaptation, movie adaptation later. So if you want to learn more about her particular role in all this, the reason why they are summoned together, as we will kind of softly transition into the Fate lore with a capital L part, is that, as I said, technically they both painted works that were released under the name of Hokusai. So they shared pseudonyms at points, and she did some paintings as her father, and, as a collab. So when you call upon the heroic spirit of Hokusai, you get both of them. And so in Fate, it's important to remember that, no, Hokusai is not technically a gender flip character. The woman who takes up the majority of the servant body is the daughter, Oo'i. And that little weird octopus man, often referred to as the fandom as Octodad, is the original Katsushika Hokusai himself, the great artist. And then they do some kind of weird stuff later that I won't spoil because it's in Ascensions. Now, some of this stuff is going to be covered in the trial quest we should get with this, so I don't want to go too in-depth. Sorry, slightly scratchy throat. But overall, the basis here is that's why you get 2 of them. Now, the reason why he is an octopus and why they are classed as a foreigner is interesting. So, like I said, one of the actual Hokusai's pseudonyms was the man mad about art. And we also know, as I mentioned earlier, that Hokusai is known for the infamous Dream of a Fisherman's Wife, which is, has the infamy to be the world's first tentacle porn, probably. And it is described as a dream. So, in Fate, the crazy artist, with his lots of watery themes, apparently had a dream vision of some kind of dark demon god of an abyss or something from the beyond, who maybe has a spooky book that other characters in Fate have that are very tentacly. It was Cthulhu, or Cthulhu, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It's a fake name. You can pronounce it however you like. Yeah, he was that guy, the Big C. And so he had this kind of confrontation with him in a dream world and almost fell into madness, but then was like, yo, dog, your sense of art sucks, though. And basically rejects the power and kind of touches madness, but does not fall into madness, and so is strengthened by it and has that kind of mad power. You can see this by the fact that well, you can't see it yet because I haven't transitioned to the mechanics, but in the skills, Abigail, for instance, has the insanity buff. She is directly channeling the power of an outside god, whereas Hokusai as a servant does not. Has skills more in line with a caster, but also has the big foreigner skill. And divinity, which I'd have to check, Matt, if that's supposed to be a Hokusai is so good at art they are like a god, or just they touched a weird outside power and thus are godly. I don't know. Sometimes you can't be sure with what they mean by that. I would have to check, but it's not super important. That's just like a minor detail overall, I think. But the important thing is that to qualify as a foreigner, Octodad touched the alien power and then was not tainted by it. Like, he was altered, but he was able to kind of make it his own and turn it into art. That's right, he's so crazy about art, he couldn't go regular crazy. And like I said, most of these details should be covered in trial questing and further details down the line. And that's really it on our front sections on history and lore. Super interesting, and like I said, a lot of these artworks are super iconic. I can't even list them all. There's literally 36 views of Mount Fuji in just that one work. But let's move into mechanics. Alright, so mechanically, Hokusai is our second SSR foreigner, so far the only other SSR foreigner after Abigail, a previous wanted subject. They have the exact same attack, but Abby has slightly higher, about 500. Sorry, 700 is the total after the 13,000, but it's about 500 higher than Hokusai. Hokusai has slightly better star absorption, but I would say significantly it's about half of Abigail's star generation, which is interesting. Foreigners there's only 3 of them, and they're somewhat significantly different. They're kind of chaotic overall in how their core stats go, you know? So obviously her NP charge per attack is low, but she has really, really high hit counts, the 6, and has decent hit counts on her Buster cards and Quick Card, I should say, and moderately on the extra there. So it should balance out, and then also has a decently number of hitting on her Arts Noble Phantasm. So there's probably going to be a lot of direct comparison between Hokusai and Abigail. They're released very close together. They're both SSRs of the same class. So there's going to be some comparison, but fundamentally, and I said this in the Abigail Wanted, they're fairly different because Abby is that single target Buster NP, which has that very unique effect to strip all their buffs before doing damage, you know, similar to the Amakusa effect. So there's that, whereas Hokusai, while she does have trait damage, or he, she, they, I think either works because they're both, there's an Octodad and a Brush Daughter. But most people will probably just say she with Hokusai, just for the sake of making it consistent. That's an AoE arts with multiple hits. It does have a trait damage, and it does have some interesting effects which work with some of the skills, which we'll talk about in a second. And you can NP arts with those 6-hit arts cards. With some stuff, you can do some pretty brutal combos, but it's still not going to be quite the same. With the same raw attack, the damage should not be quite the same as a Buster. Because, yeah, let's see. So, like, I think still inherent card multipliers on Buster would make it better, but even then, at best, you're going to get the same amount of damage if you happen to trait overdo it, and then you don't get that buff strip effect, right? So if enemies have defensive abilities, you can't get through them. But overall, like I said, I think they do different things. Hokusai is probably slightly more popular overall, I think, as terms of a unit mechanically, because there's that NPAA, they got decent hit counts in the NP and the arts. The slightly higher base NP gen means you can spam slightly more, and it kind of cleans up farming a lot easier. You know, Berserker bosses are obviously a thing, but so are Berserker mobs, and Hokusai does just as great at cleaning that up. Plus, there's a fairly decent amount of man attribute enemies, which is what the bonus damage on the NP was, in case that wasn't clear earlier. So it's a basic arts AoE, and then it's extra trait damage with overcharge based on enemies with the man attribute. Which, by the way, includes Hokusai, so if you ever want to beat a boss Hokusai, bring Hokusai, because Hokusai is human and also a foreigner, so then you get trait damage and class advantage. Ba-ba-ba. So, active skills, All of Creation A+, is a NP battery at 30% and a 1-turn self-evade with a minimum 5-turn cooldown. That's great. First of all, that means that unless they've got some special ability, you can ignore every enemy who's got a 5-charge NP bar. Like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure Berserkers are only 5 charges. But also the 30% battery, that means you can do dumb farming strats with stuff like K-scopes and other chargers. And just in general, it can be really helpful to control when you can pop that NP. Or finish off starting a loop if you don't get quite all the way back to 100%. A very decent skill. The bond between father and daughter A is also 5-turn cooldown. This gives you 3 turns of self-arts effectiveness, 20 to 30%, so that's a NP steroid and core card type steroid, which also means you're generating more NP. You've got 50 to 100% buff cleanse resistance, which is an unusual state, but still fairly useful. And it's 1 turn, so that would mean that you would resist all that. And then also buffs your normal debuff resistance 50 to 100%. Now, with both of those only being 1 turn, that's a little awkward to be like, okay, I don't want you to follow this up and hurt me. But it's still very useful. It's a little more spread. And Also, you'll notice that compared to Abigail, these cooldowns are much, much shorter. Which is another reason why mechanically I think Hokusai is a little bit more popular, but I don't know. It's probably not going to be a more popular video. I don't know. You guys shocked me, at least at the time of this recording. Like, I think Abigail is like twice or more as many views as Aresh. Not sometimes. The last one, Pseudonym Alien Octopus. This is the big one, I think. It's up to 6 turn cooldown, but for 3 turns, when you attack an enemy with an arts card, which, unless I'm grossly mistaken, includes your NP, you inflict defense down on it. And the buff lasts 3 turns, and the defense down is 10 to 20%. So hey, whenever you use arts cards, including possibly when you use the NP, you slap an enemy with a defense down. And that's really where Hokusai all comes together. When you can use that battery to fire into an NP, possibly right away if you've got a K-scope on there. When you can art steroid yourself so you NP charge faster and do more damage with arts cards. And then when every time you're hitting with an arts card, including your NP, which is AoE, you're reducing their defense by up to 20% stackable. You're doing some pretty brutal blows and possibly chaining this in. Give her some good art support like a Tamamo. Heck, even just throw in Waver for the extra damage and the battery. You'll do crazy. For foreigners, their star absorption is pretty good. You know, it's in that middle range. Not quite as high as Riders, but decently up there. So while she doesn't really do star gen on her own, as I said, her star generation is lower, even more so than Abigail's, though she does have more hits and has 2 buster cards. Critting isn't inherently in her nature, but you could probably do some buffs with that, like, say, if you're using Kazgil, who's also a great art support. You could even get arts crits in there and be doing even more damage, charging even more NP. And you can do some dumb stuff with Hokusai, okay? So, passive skills, you've got another EX Transcendental Existence, which increases her innate debuff resist by a lot and gives you a couple critical stars every turn. You've also got a Divinity B, buffing your base damage. And then you've got Item Creation B for extra debuff infliction chance, so your debuffs are more likely to stick, namely that defense down, which is very important. And only Territory Creation D, so you're only getting a little bit extra punch on those inherent arts cards. But still, it's a little bit that helps, and helps you kind of punch up a little bit. And the important thing to remember about foreigners is that, much like why people love Jolter, and arguably even why Emperor Qin Wang works, why he works is because rulers also have neutral damage versus most people, and he has way, way high multipliers. Big old Mothman. Foreigners do most damage, neutral damage to most people, except they do extra damage to other foreigners, and they do extra damage to berserkers and take less back. The only complication is if you bring them to fight alter egos, who are their weakness. But usually you'd be using a different comp for that, unless it was some kind of weird mixed-up nodes. So that means that with a trait multiplier for man trait enemies, Hokusai is hitting at least neutrals, possibly some highs, some inherent trait damage on there, like I said, on enemies, with a couple of decent stuff. And heck, if you're farming berserkers, this is just great. This is just cleanup. That, AoE effect, everybody's dead, Dave. It's over. So again, ideally that means that your supports are going to look like anything that's NP or art support, anything that's starting NP support, because either you can use your natural arts card to capitalize that, or you can get, a little bit extra with some chargers. Obviously, the battery on your evade means you have to watch out your defensive potential. That's always a little bit awkward, but it is a 5-turn cooldown. So if you can be a little more careful managing that, you can, work it out to be okay. And the other thing is just, like I said, starting NP is the key thing there. K-scope, MLB, Imaginary Element, I think takes you over 70%. It's like 60 to 75, I think is how that works. So there's a lot of useful CEs that can go on her. And then support is just, like I said, art support, Kazgil, Tamamo, Waver in a pinch. There are a few other characters and other classes that may fit there, because, again, you're mostly probably going to be using her either because you know the enemy is man attribute and you want to try and do that trait damage, or you're facing berserkers or other foreigners to get even more extra damage, which means you can be a little bit more free with your supports, and that all works out. So, rarity, well, guess what? As befitting most New Year's servants, Hokusai is pretty rare. So far, only just the upcoming New Year, and then the following New Year, have Hokusai rate-ups. So if you miss these opportunities, you're going to have to wait, a couple of years, technically a year and a half by now, I guess, for the free Saber Hokusai. Get your own version. And even then, you won't get that special stuff. Now, I would not say it's crazy to think there might be another one in there somewhere, maybe, but also Abigail only has gotten 2, so I don't know. And I think that also means that, technically, I think that means that all foreigners are at 2 right now, because MHXX, the 4-star, would be the first run of that and then the rerun. But yeah, so if you don't have a foreigner yet, I do, you probably want to get on that train, because those rate-ups are going to get kind of scarce eventually. Alright, that's the show. Hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, seriously, I can't possibly compact down all of Hokusai's incredibly long career. Just do some Googling, you'll see some art you probably recognize, and look it all up. It's great stuff. Like I said, very impactful, very culturally relevant even today, both in and out of Japan. And yeah, I wish you guys your fellow luck rolling for Hokusai. I know I will be trying with actual quartz. And we'll see how that works out, because I don't think that's ever gone well for me with a New Year's servant yet, so we'll see. Alrighty, well, time to do the usual outro. Make sure to give this video a like if you liked it. If you have any comments, you can leave them in the comment section down below, or hit up our Discord. The link is always in the description. If you are new here and haven't already, please subscribe to our channel so you can always get our latest videos. I got a little surprise planned for Wanted later. You might think the next one is Valentine's, but you could be wrong. And some other fun stuff throughout the year. Maybe even revisiting old servants who had Wanteds, but maybe have gotten buffs since I've started doing the show. So there's actually more different information on them. Yeah, so make sure to sub so you can get a hold of that. And considering that bell for notifications so you can always know when we post a new video. It's great for all that interaction stuff. And of course, like I said at the front of the show, consider supporting us on Patreon. You could have gotten access to this episode early and lots of other goodies, such as downloading our audio podcast version of Let's Talk Fate Grand Order and more. And it really helps us out, really helps drive the channel to get bigger and better. Alright, so I will see you in the future for more Let's Talk FGO, and of course more Wanted videos. And be sure to check out other stuff, like Lucky's been streaming some FGO lately. Check those out when he does it. That's another good reason to hit that bell for notifications. Alrighty, I gotta go paint a wave, so bye everybody.